Greetings! Welcome back to yet another analysis from the second season of the Champions Chess Tour and from the first tournament, Skilling Open. So today, or this time rather, we will take a look at Hikaru Nakamura against the Nepomniachtchi. A very important victory for Nakamura. And it was a very good game as well, and that is the reason I wanted to show you guys this game. So let's take a look here. 1e4, c5. Nepomniachtchi is known for his Sicilian. Seems like he's kind of stepped away from his French. So he is back to his Najdorf, and knight of 3, d6. Najdorf is shown here after d4, takes, knight f6, knight c3, and the move a6. There are tons of other options there, and one of them being g6, which is the dragon, and another one being the classical Sicilian after knight c6. Benjamin Halldorson made an excellent video series on this on Chess24. But I digress, so let's take a look. So after a6, white can play pretty much every single playable move. Let me mention a few. f3, bishop e3, g3, h3, h4, bishop e2, bishop d3, bishop c4, queen d3, bishop g5, which was usually considered the main line, probably still is. Rook b1, even a3, a4, knight b3. You get it. You can play anything in this position. And a lot of moves are extremely dangerous. So when you play the Najdorf, you are required to know a lot of theory. f4 as well, of course. But Nakamura, he decided to go for bishop d3, which is nowadays a fairly rare move. You do not see this one very often. I don't believe it is particularly critical either. I think g6 in this position is quite interesting because you get a nice dragon and white doesn't really get his attack going. Bishop d3 is not that good for white in the dragon. So g6 there is interesting, and but Nepomniachtchi did something else. He played e5, which is a very standard move. This kind of establishes how the game will go on. Because in Najdorf with black, you usually play either e6 or e5. If you play e5, you weaken the d5 square quite a bit, but you get play on the dark squares. And if you play e6, you will usually follow up with b5, bishop e7, and knight e7, knight e5, and potentially knight e7, knight c5 as well, or knight b6, knight e7, knight c5. That's a lot of arrows, but this usually happens, and I can even show that, I suppose. So many arrows on the screen. But for example, in a Najdorf like bishop e3, e6, and f3, b5, queen d2, for example, and then bishop e7. Yeah, this is played quite a bit. Maybe I might be messing up, but you get the point. Just trying to explain the ideas here. But knight e2 is played by Nakamura, e5 by Nepomniachtchi, of course. I would assume that it's very possible to go here too, and then maybe play for an attack once again. But it's kind of a disadvantage to have the bishop on d3, and one of the main issues is that it's easier now for black to play d5, and if black is able to play d5, it's going to do quite well. So knight e2, bishop e7, castles, and then knight g3. Logical move. You want to play f4 or knight f5 in the future, maybe even take on e5. And you do still prevent d5, which is important because we can take, and if black takes, we take back. It's not possible to take because the pawn on h7 is taken, and the queen as well. Nice discovery there. This is kind of important, but the bishop is moved to e6 instead, for the reason that he wants to play d5. The Nakamura, he wants to avoid that, so he puts his knight on d5. Takes, and the pawn structure now has been slightly established here. The diagonal is open, but in return, black can now put his knight on c5, which is a very nice square, where the knight will be standing quite well, and maybe even at some point put the bishop on b6, this diagonal right here. Or maybe also play g6 and then later f5. These are black's plans. White wants to play c4, maybe even f4 in the future to try to open up a little bit, because white has the bishop pair. Opening up the position will, at least sometimes, be quite advantageous. One of the problems with playing f4 though is that it gives away the e5 square, so we gotta be a bit careful about that. But g6 is played. Again, one of the plans I mentioned. c4, knight b7. Same moves that I also mentioned earlier here. Jumping to c5 is gonna come. So a3. This move is quite common. Knight c5, bishop c2. The point of a3 is to simply play b4 in the future and kick away the knight. Just that white needs to be careful when he plays b4 so the pawn on c4 doesn't get severely weakened, though. I should mention that. And here Nepomniachtchi makes his first error, and that's to play b5. The problem with this is that it weakens the pawn on b5 quite a lot, and it is squared on c6. b4 could come very quickly, as you can see here. b4, knight b7. Black's pieces are already looking very bad compared to what they were looking just like 3 moves ago, like this. So b5 is pretty inaccurate. Maybe it would have been better to push h5 here. The point being that h4 could come and kick away this knight, and that's not so easy to deal with, because you should never play h4 yourself, because that pawn is going to get taken quite quickly. So h5 would have been very interesting, and then later h4. But Nepomniachtchi played b5, b4 from Nakamura, knight b7, takes, and then bishop h6, another tempo. So rook e8 is a forced move, and bishop d3. So we now see what I was mentioning here. The pawn on b5 is very, very weak. And this also does work out nicely tactically. So knight takes d5 is a forced sequence. You can take a look at the evaluation bar here, and you notice that the advantage here is it's going through the roof, and the position is simply lost. Except the knight takes d5, queen f3, white wins a piece. There's nothing Nepomniachtchi can do in order to save his knight. And here you don't really have any moves, because if you play something queen b6, I can always simply play bishop e3 and then kick away the queen again. So you cannot protect this pawn, and if you get this position, you are completely lost. And as a matter of fact, the advantage is it's like +5, which is sounds crazy, but it's dead lost. So let's take a look. Knight takes d5, queen f3, knight c3, queen takes b7. White is now up a piece. Of course, he's completely winning. Let's see what happens. d5 is a way to try to trap the queen, but bishop d2 saves the day, because we simply have queen a7 after rook b8. And it's not so dangerous, because now we can survive like this. And if d4 is played, we can then simply take on c3. The queen is not going to get trapped. So let's take a look. Knight e4 was played. Kind of a tricky move. If you take with the knight, you lose a piece, but Nakamura took with the bishop. Takes rook fd1. Very simple chess here. f5. These pawns are a little bit scary, but this position is lost. Bishop c3, bishop d6. You can't allow the trade of queens. Queen e3 simply. Queen f6. Bishop b2. Bishop c7. Queen b3 check. King h8, and now rook d7. Very nice to get the rook on the 7th rank here. Maybe play rook f7 and then rook d1 later to try to double on the 7th rank, which would be killing. Bishop e6, rook d1. Very simple. Rook e6. You cannot allow rook f7. Bishop c1 is played here. Nakamura wants to put his bishop on h6. Rook e8. I mean, I still think bishop h6 here that looks like the game is over to me, even though it still is because of the extra piece. But he played bishop e3, takes 6. He simply wants to trade more pieces. And after h5, rook c7 came, h4, knight e2, f4, e takes f4, e takes f4, and here a very, very nice tactic, knight takes f4, and the game is officially completely over. It went from over to there's no way you will ever save this game over. That's how over this is. And the reason this works is that if you take, I take on e6, and if you take back, there is a mate after rook d8. And another important point is that queen takes e7 is met by queen takes e8. And that's also completely winning. And if you're not going to take back on f4, you will lose. And another thing I also can mention is that queen e3 is also just met by king h1 or king f1. And there are no checks at all. Black is lost. So Nepomniachtchi tried with rook f8, but after queen takes e6, queen takes f4, queen b6, preventing queen f2 and queen f1, h3, queen d4 check, and then rook c6, pinning the rook. He resigned. In a standard game, he probably would have resigned as early as queen f3 here. I think he must have missed this, because after this, the game is technically completely winning, especially on this level. But of course, he decided to play on because it's rapid. You got nothing to lose, right? So why resign? So that just shows how b5, it just went completely wrong after that. So playing something like h5 would have made a huge difference. After b5, the position is very, very bad, and could even be so bad that it's objectively lost. This was a very important victory for Hikaru Nakamura, who now is ranked as number 6. This defeat wasn't a crisis for Nepomniachtchi, who is ranked as number 5, actually. He's sharing the same spot with Nakamura. So they're both doing well when they will be heading into the last day tomorrow, and it will be decided who's going to qualify for the knockout stage. Do stay tuned.